So, yeah, we have got a bit of a problem here. Let's get this fixed, shall we? So those of you who aren't aware what this was the first ever project I made on YouTube. It was made during my second year of the degree at Rycotewood, and it is definitely the most complex thing I've ever made. You've got miters in the curved corners of this, it's got shelves joining to a curved section. The doors, as you can see, are curved. The whole thing was a huge experiment to see if it would work. I came up with this design late one night. I was just laying there in bed, unable to sleep, and this just popped into my head. It went through a lot of development and refinement to get to this final design, but this basic idea was courtesy of my brain, which was awesome. Now, saying that, it was also quite a bit of an experiment because I had no idea how to hinge curved doors. It's not something I'd seen done before, especially the way I had done it, where the curved doors were recessed inside the frame. I've seen it before where the doors were on top of the frame because you could just get like a curved barrel hinge here that matches the radius on the door, but something like this, yeah, never seen it before, and I just thought I'd have a go at it. So after loads of experimentation and development, I came up with the idea of these hinges. I called them bear claw hinges at the time. I stick by that name, it's awesome. These are made of lignum vitae, which is an incredibly hard and oily wood, which lends itself very well to something like this, where there's a lot of friction involved in it and needs to be made of something quite hard wearing. There's a pin going through the top of it that I painted on top in order to create like a mushroom head so it doesn't fall out the bottom, and I'm really, really happy with how they came out. The only issue being, as you can see, they have not withstood the test of time. It's now been 2 or 3 years since I built this thing. About 2 years after I constructed it, this door just randomly fell off. And that's quite obviously down to the weight of the door not having enough support on these two parts of the hinge. The 3 knuckles join to the cabinet, I think there is enough surface area there to actually hold them in place, but the 2 on the door, it's kind of just like holding it there in a very small area, and combined with the weight of the copper and everything, that door would have just slowly sagged over time and obviously snapped off as it has done. So this obviously needs to be repaired, and I thought I would take you guys on the journey with me. The difficulty being, I've got a very even shadow gap around all of these doors, and I need to try and fix this one in place to match that shadow gap. Furthermore, I need to find a way of making it more secure so that this doesn't happen to this door or even that one again in the future. I've kind of got a rough idea of how I'm going to fix this. Where'd that go? There it is. I have got a bit of veneer here that I'm going to use to space the door away from the carcass and the other door as well. Now, originally I did this with constructional veneer, which is 1mm thick. This stuff is 0.6, so I'm going to have to make a few layers of it. But I'm going to cut this into strips, wrap it around the door, and yeah, use it as spacers. Let's see what we got here. Did I cut it right? Yes. So I'm going to try 3 layers first. Pop that in there, something like that. See if we can get the door in without dropping it. Ooh. Okay, that hasn't worked. All right, looks like that'll work. So I've got 3 bits of veneer in the middle. There's 2 going down vertical, and then that one jammed in there is the 3rd one. I've put 1 underneath the fixed door because those 3 in the middle were kind of pushing that sideways. So I wanted just to support that from underneath, and then 3 going up the side, and then spaced it out with 3 at the top as well. And that has given a pretty nice even gap. I do remember there being like, you see that bit of misalignment there? I do remember that being there. Unfortunately, I am just going to have to live with that, but yeah. That's a bit annoying. So originally when I attached these hinges, I did it with epoxy because gluing lignum vitae, as I said, it's incredibly oily and it is rubbish to try and glue to. Epoxy is pretty much the strongest glue you can go for, so I had a lot of trust in using that, which I think is fair enough. It's mainly down to the actual surface area rather than the glue itself as to why this failed. But to hinge the doors this time, I'm still going to use epoxy for it. I'm also going to rough up the back of the hinges again to give it more of a bite when it glues on, which again is exactly what I did before. However, this time I'm also going to put a screw in from the back of the door so that those hinges are constantly being pulled into the door. No matter what that glue joint is wanting to do or the leverage on the door, if the screws are there, in theory, it should last for a bit longer. So I will also be screwing the other one just for insurance purposes, but for now I need to glue this with epoxy. The issue being that door is not supported from behind at the moment. When I fixed these originally, I put the hinges on the door first, got them spaced out like I've done here, and then just folded these knuckles down and glued them to the cabinet afterwards. I just held them in place with a clamp there, clamp around the back of it, which worked quite well. But obviously I'm doing it in reverse this time, so I need to make a spacer to fit behind the door, and then I can hopefully get a clamp on these hinges to push it into the door and make sure I don't get any squeeze out and completely seize that hinge. Now we know that works, let's get all of these out and work out how big that spacer actually needs to be. I can't help but think this glue joint is going as well. If I just wiggle the door like that, I can hear something going on. I'm not going to say like a crunching sound because it's not a crunching sound, but I don't know whether to just try and break this door off, fix it at the same time, like re-glue it. Or is that really risky? I think I'll leave it for now, and then I'll just see what happens when I put the screws in the back. I think that'll be the best thing to do. Continue as planned. So I should be able to get a lot of pressure on that when I clamp it down. I'm now going to just rough up the areas where I need to glue these hinges, and we'll get epoxy in it. Cool, I'm going to do a quick dry fit of it just to ensure that it will all hold down nicely and I'll get plenty of pressure on it. Okay, looking at it now, I think 3 veneers on the curve may be a little bit, like that gap looks way too big compared to the middle one. I am going to reduce those 3, where's my finger there? Those 3 veneers to 2 veneers, because the other thing is there's a lot of pressure on the door pushing against the veneer here and at the other end, but then the gap in the middle is a lot bigger, which means that the spacing obviously isn't even there either. So I'll reduce the curved spacer to 2 leaves of veneer. It'll obviously make the gap between the doors a little bit bigger, but I'd rather it be a consistent gap around the edge and then, you know, maybe a slightly larger gap between the doors, but at least it's symmetrical that way. Right, that seems to have worked okay. The hinges are clamped to the door, and then the other side of the clamps is actually just clamped directly to the workbench underneath. So plenty of pressure on that. Now I'm going to mix up the epoxy. Ideally, I would have used one of those syringe pre-mixed epoxies where it just distributes the perfect amount, because with these, I'm going to have to measure it on the scales, and I'm going to have to mix a little bit more than I need in order to fix these. So it's going to be a bit of a waste, but it is what it is. With epoxy, it's not a case of just adding a little bit more hardener if you want it to dry quicker, or add more epoxy if you want the joint to be stronger. It doesn't work like that. You have to get the mix absolutely spot on, which is why I'm mixing a little bit more than I need here, because the smaller the amount you mix, the more chance you've got of getting it wrong. So I'm probably going to try and do 10 grams of hardener and then 50 grams of the resin. So you've got to make sure this is really, really thoroughly mixed to make sure it properly goes off. I've got the fast setting hardener here, so it has started heating up. With epoxy, it's an exothermic reaction, so I don't tend to leave pots like this overnight while unattended in the workshop, because it does get hot enough to smoke sometimes, and I don't really want to leave that unattended in the workshop. So I'll use what I need and then just put this outside in a nice open area to harden overnight. And then before adding the epoxy, I'm going to wipe down the lignum vitae with methylated spirits to get rid of any of that surface oil that's on there that will make the epoxy joint weaker. It's just a quick rub over with that. That should cut through any oil on there. What I want to avoid here is loads of squeeze out. As I said before, that will seize the hinge. So I need to be pretty controlled about this. I think I might have just put too much on, to be honest. Okay, that should be a lot more secure than it was before. I'll still add the screws to it, but when I did this before, I had the cabinet upright and I spaced the doors out and then glued it with the clamps going horizontal, and I don't know why I did it like that. I could have just laid it flat and do it like this. But from what I remember, I didn't have a lot of squeeze out when I did that because I was worried about gluing the hinges together. But with this, I can see a tiny bead of epoxy that squeezed out the edges of the hinge, and I think that should be quite secure. So we'll come back in a couple of days when this is completely dry and get those screws in place. And in the meantime, I'm going to find out what I can glue together with all this remaining epoxy that I've got. Right, we're back a couple of days later, moment of truth. Let's see how it's dried. Ooh, certainly felt crunchy then. Okay, well that's a start. The gluing block came off. Which way up does this go? I always forget this. There is a way up to it. Oh wait, the thing on the back. I'm gonna say it's this way. Yes. What was that? Oh, it was the block inside. Oh my God, that scared me. Right. Whew. Good. The door is hinged again. Hey. That's good. It didn't seem to hit. I should probably check that. Yeah. The gap isn't quite as even as I would like. It's definitely sagged somewhat. You can see there's not a lot of a gap down here, whereas at the top, yeah, I think that is just the nature of these hinges though. There's not a lot of surface area for them to actually grab and keep those doors upright when they're glued on. Now the question is, do I put the screws in the back or not? Because I'm pretty confident I've put more epoxy on this time. That'll do a much better job at holding it, but I should probably future-proof it. However, I don't have any nice screws. Like ideally, on the back of this door, you know, I don't want any silver chrome-plated screws on the back of there. It would be pretty cool to have two black dome-headed screws, but I don't have any. I might go for brass screws instead because they'll kind of blend in with the metal doors-ish. It's all I got. It's all I've got. Let's go for it. So the only screws I've got are these 4x20 Torx head screws, which do not look amazing. However, you know, if I just get these driven in, then there's always an opportunity for me to change them to some nice black screws later on. I think I'll just leave them at these for now, just to ensure it works. So the first thing I need to do is measure in from the edge of the door to work out where I need to put these screws on the opposite side. Let's see, and we'll try and aim for that nice meaty part of it there. So it looks to be like that will be going in. Oh man, how do you measure this? Some mad parallax going on here, but I think that is going to be about 10 millimeters from the outside edge. Okay, that looks to be the location of the first two. All right, so now I need to get a pilot hole through this. It's going to be absolutely terrifying. So I've wrapped a bit of masking tape around the drill so I know that I'm going deep enough. I cannot see if I'm going in the correct angle, but I would rather look at it from this direction rather than here so that I can make sure it's going in straight like this, because I don't want to blow out the side of one of the hinges. All right, and then I'll widen those to a 4mm clearance hole, which is only going to drill through the door, not into the hinge, or else the screw will not work. And finally a little countersink. And I'm going to drive these in by hand to get pure control from this. It's weird, it somehow sorted out the doors a bit. I guess it's kind of expanded the lignum, so it's actually made it more of a tighter fit in the hinges. Happy days. So yeah, I think we'll call that repaired for the time being, but I've decided to make this video a Patreon only video as a thank you to you guys for continually supporting me out of, quite frankly, the goodness of your heart, because I'm struggling to find methods to reward you guys, but I really don't want you to think that your support is taken for granted. It really, really helps me out, so thank you so much for that. I'm going to try and start doing little things like this, maybe behind the scenes video for you guys to watch. But yeah, really appreciate it. More stuff coming soon. Thank you for watching, and I will see you. I will see you back on YouTube, maybe. That was the worst ending ever. I'll end it there.